Dad beamed at Thanksgiving, his voice carrying across the table with that particular pride he reserved for my sister. Jessica's fiancé runs operations at Memorial Hospital. Real authority. Brad manages a $40 million budget. Mom nodded enthusiastically, passing the mashed potatoes. Such a stable career. Benefits, retirement plan, the whole package. She glanced at me, her smile dimming. Rachel, when will you get a stable job? You can't do residencies forever. I cut my turkey carefully, keeping my eyes on my plate. I'm happy with my work. Work? Dad scoffed. You're 34 years old, still doing 80-hour weeks for resident pay. Your sister's getting married to a hospital executive. Don't you want stability? Jessica reached across the table and squeezed Brad's hand. He was nice enough, polished, confident, the kind of guy who wore expensive watches and talked about operational efficiency at dinner parties. He'd been with Memorial for 6 months, hired from a consulting firm to streamline hospital operations. Brad's already making changes, Jessica said. He's implementing new protocols, cutting unnecessary spending. The CEO loves him. Brad smiled modestly. Just doing my job. Healthcare administration is all about finding efficiencies without compromising patient care. That's exactly the kind of strategic thinking Rachel needs to learn, Dad said, pointing his fork at me. Instead of just doing medical stuff, you need to think bigger picture. I took a sip of water. I'll keep that in mind. I'm serious, Rachel. You're smart enough. Why not go into administration? Brad could probably help you get your foot in the door. Right, Brad? Brad shifted uncomfortably. Well, administration requires a different skill set. Business acumen, financial management. Rachel has a medical degree, Mom interrupted. Surely that counts for something. Of course, Brad said quickly. I just meant that clinical work and administrative work are different paths. Brad's being modest, Jessica said. He's already identified $3 million in potential savings in the surgical department. Some doctors are resistant, but Brad says that's typical. They don't understand the business side. I met Brad's eyes across the table. Which surgical department? Oh, various inefficiencies. Equipment purchases, staff scheduling, overtime costs. The previous administrator just rubber-stamped everything the surgeons wanted. He smiled. That's changing now. I see. You should come tour Memorial sometime, Jessica offered. Brad can show you around. Maybe it would inspire you to think beyond just being a resident. I'm not a resident anymore. Fellow then. Whatever it's called. The point is you're still in training while Brad's actually running things. I set down my fork. Jessica, I finished my fellowship 3 years ago. She blinked. What are you then? I'm an attending surgeon. Oh. She waved her hand dismissively. Well, that's still not management. You're still just doing surgeries. Dad leaned forward. Rachel, what Jessica's trying to say is that there's more to a hospital than the operating room. Brad's position has real influence. Budget authority, strategic planning. I understand what hospital administration does, Dad. Then you understand why Brad's career is so impressive. He's only 36 and he's already managing the operations budget at Memorial. I finished. You've mentioned it 5 times. Mom's lips thinned. There's no need for that tone. We're proud of Brad. We're proud of Jessica for finding such an accomplished partner. She paused. We'd like to be proud of you too, dear. The rest of Thanksgiving passed in familiar patterns. Jessica and Brad discussed wedding plans. A June ceremony at the country club, honeymoon in Tuscany. Dad asked Brad about his investment portfolio. Mom showed everyone photos of the house Jessica and Brad were buying in the suburbs. No one asked about my work. No one asked about my life. I left at 8, pleading in early morning. In my car, I sat for a moment before starting the engine, looking at the warm lights of my parents' house. They had no idea who I was. And I'd stopped trying to tell them. I drove to my condo in the city, changed into comfortable clothes and reviewed patient charts for Monday's surgeries. 3 complex cases. A coronary bypass, a valve replacement and a tumor resection that would take most of the day. My phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, our chief medical officer. Budget meeting moved to December 4th, 9 a.m. All department heads required. Be prepared to defend your equipment requests. I typed back, "See you there." December arrived cold and gray. Memorial Hospital rose 12 stories above the city, a teaching hospital affiliated with the state university. I'd trained here, completed my general surgery residency and cardiothoracic fellowship here, and been recruited back as an attending 3 years ago. 2 years ago I'd been named chief of surgery. It wasn't something I advertised. The title came with administrative headaches I didn't particularly enjoy. Budget meetings, personnel issues, strategic planning sessions. But it also came with the authority to protect my department, to fight for my surgeons, to ensure we had the resources we needed to save lives. My family knew I worked at Memorial. They knew I was a surgeon. They'd never asked my specific role and I'd never volunteered it. Why would I? They'd already decided I was less successful than my sister. Facts wouldn't change that narrative. December 4th began at 5:30 a.m. with a trauma case. Motorcycle accident, internal bleeding, a young man who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. By 8:45 he was stable in the ACU and I was scrubbing out, exhausted but satisfied. I changed into clean scrubs, grabbed my budget folders and headed to the executive conference room on the 12th floor. Patricia was already there reviewing notes. She looked up and smiled. "Good save on the motorcycle case. I heard it was touch and go. He's 23. He'll pull through. That's why you're the best we have." He checked her watch. "We've got a full house today. New operations administrator wants to make an impression. Brad Harrison? You know him. He's engaged to my sister." Patricia's eyebrows rose. "Small world. He's been here 6 months and he's already making waves. Lots of ideas about efficiency and cost cutting. I've heard. Well, prepare yourself. He's got some strong opinions about surgical department spending." The conference room filled up. Department heads, division chiefs, the CFO, the CEO. And Brad, sitting near the head of the table in an expensive suit, reviewing spreadsheets on his laptop. He didn't look up when I entered. Why would he? As far as he knew, I was just another overworked surgeon somewhere in this building. We'd never discussed specifics at Thanksgiving. I took my seat at the table. Patricia sat at the head with the CEO, Dr. James Morrison, beside her. "All right, everyone," Patricia began. "Let's get started. We're here to review departmental budget requests for the next fiscal year. As you know, we're facing pressure to reduce costs while maintaining quality of care. Brad Harrison, our Director of Operations, will be presenting his analysis." Brad stood, clicking to his first slide. "Thank you, Dr. Okonkwo. I've spent the past 6 months reviewing our operational efficiency, and I've identified several areas where we can significantly reduce spending without impacting patient outcomes." He clicked through slides showing graphs, percentages, comparative data from other hospitals. "The surgical department is our largest cost center," Brad continued. "Last year, surgical services accounted for $127 million in expenses. My analysis suggests we can reduce that by 15 to 20% through better scheduling, reduced equipment purchases and streamlined staffing." I listened, taking notes. Some of his suggestions were reasonable. Others showed a fundamental misunderstanding of how surgery actually worked. For example, Brad said, the cardiothoracic division ordered 3 new surgical robots last year at $2 million each. That's $6 million on equipment that sits unused 60% of the time. Dr. Marcus Webb, one of my senior cardiothoracic surgeons, bristled. "Those robots are essential for minimally invasive procedures, which represent only 40% of your surgical volume," Brad interrupted smoothly. "I'm suggesting we don't need 3. 2 would suffice, saving $2 million. And when all 3 are needed simultaneously?" Marcus asked. "When we have multiple emergent cases? You schedule more efficiently. You don't have 3 emergent robot-assisted cases simultaneously if you're properly managing your time." "You can't schedule emergencies," Marcus said flatly. Brad smiled. "You can schedule elective procedures to ensure capacity for emergencies. It's basic operational planning." I watched this exchange, saying nothing. Marcus glanced at me, clearly expecting support. I gave him a small shake of my head. "Not yet." Brad moved to his next slide. "Additionally, the surgical department has excessive overtime costs. Last year we paid $4.2 million in overtime to surgical staff. By hiring 2 additional scheduling coordinators at $120,000 total, we could eliminate most of that overtime, netting $4 million in savings. Dr. Sarah Chin, Chief of General Surgery, spoke up. The overtime exists because surgeries run long. Because complications arise. Because we can't just abandon a patient mid-procedure because we've hit our scheduled time. Of course not, Brad agreed. But better preoperative planning could reduce procedure times. Better coordination could prevent scheduling conflicts. These are solvable problems. Have you ever observed a surgery? Sarah asked. Brad paused. I've reviewed surgical records and timing data extensively. That's not what I asked. I don't need to perform surgery to understand operational efficiency, Dr. Chen. The tension in the room was thick. Patricia intervened. Let's table this for now. Brad, what else do you have? He clicked to another slide. Supply costs. The surgical department spends $18 million annually on supplies. Sutures, instruments, disposables. I've negotiated with alternate vendors who can provide equivalent products at 25% lower cost, saving $4.5 million. Equivalent how? I asked quietly. Brad looked at me for the first time. Really looked at me. I saw the moment of recognition. His face went still, his eyes widened slightly. I'm sorry, he said. You said equivalent products. Equivalent in what way? Same quality, same performance, same patient outcomes. He recovered quickly. Yes, all of the above. These vendors supply to comparable hospitals. Which hospitals? Regional Medical Center, St. Catherine's University Hospital. None of which are level 1 trauma centers. None of which have our surgical volume or complexity. Kept my voice even. Cheaper supplies are fine for routine procedures. They're inadequate for the complex cases that come through our doors. Brad's jaw tightened. With respect, Dr. Rachel Chin. I watched him process this. Like Sarah Chin, but that was a different person. He didn't make the connection yet. With respect, Dr. Chin, I've done extensive research. These products meet all FDA requirements. So do a lot of products I wouldn't use on my patients. Meeting minimum requirements isn't the same as meeting our standards. Patricia stepped in again. Rachel raises a good point. Brad, can you provide data on patient outcomes at hospitals using these vendors? I can compile that, yes. Please do. Before we make any supply chain changes, we need outcome data. She glanced at her notes. What else? Brad moved through several more proposals. Reducing or staff, consolidating surgical specialties, cutting the budget for continuing medical education. With each suggestion, I saw my surgeons getting more agitated. Marcus looked like he wanted to throw something. Sarah was taking furious notes. The other department heads were equally frustrated. Finally, Brad reached his last slide. In summary, I'm recommending $23 million in cuts to the surgical department budget. This represents an 18% reduction while maintaining current surgical volumes and outcomes. Based on what evidence? I asked. Brad turned to me, and I could see irritation flickering beneath his professional composure. Based on 6 months of detailed analysis, Dr. Chin. Based on comparative data from peer institutions. Based on industry best practices. Based on spreadsheets, I said. Not on surgical realities. I understand that change is difficult. This isn't about change being difficult. It's about proposed changes being dangerous. The room went quiet. Dangerous. Brad repeated. That's a strong word. It's the accurate word. Cutting our surgical robots from 3 to 2 means longer wait times for minimally invasive procedures. That means patients spending more days in pain, more time off work, more risk of complications. Switching to cheaper supplies means higher infection risks, longer procedure times, worse outcomes. Eliminating or staff means surgeons working exhausted, which means mistakes. I met his eyes. You're not cutting costs. You're cutting quality and safety. Brad's face flushed. I've been hired to improve operational efficiency. Then improve it. But not at the expense of patient care. Dr. Chin, I appreciate your passion, but this is above your purview. These are institutional decisions. About my department. He blinked. Your department? Patricia cleared her throat. Brad, I don't think you've been formally introduced. Dr. Rachel Chin is our chief of surgery. The surgical department falls under her authority. I watched the color drain from Brad's face. Watched him glance at his spreadsheet, where my name was indeed listed at the top. Chief of Surgery, Department Head. I didn't realize. He looked at me, then at Patricia, then back at me. You're the department head. For the past 2 years. But you're so young. Yes, I've heard that before. I was appointed at 32, youngest chief in Memorial's history. I smiled slightly. It's in my bio on the hospital website. Did you review the organizational chart before today? His silence was answer enough. Brad, Patricia said gently, part of effective administration is understanding who you're working with. Rachel is not only our chief of surgery but also one of the most accomplished cardiothoracic surgeons in the region. She's published 73 papers, holds 4 patents on surgical techniques, and has a patient survival rate that's among the highest in the country. Brad looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him. I apologize. I should have. I didn't. It's fine, I said, though it wasn't. Let's focus on the budget. Patricia, I have the surgical department's requests here. I'd like to walk through them. For the next hour I presented our budget needs. New equipment purchases justified with outcome data. Staffing requests, backed by surgical volume projections. Supply costs with detailed explanations of why we use specific vendors. Brad said nothing. He sat there, growing paler, occasionally checking his phone. Finally, Patricia called for a break. 15 minutes, everyone. Let's reconvene and start working toward compromise. The room emptied. Brad stood quickly, moving toward the door, but I intercepted him. Brad. A word. He stopped, turning slowly. Up close, I could see sweat on his forehead despite the cool conference room. I know this is awkward, I said quietly. Finding out I'm the department head you've been proposing to cut. Rachel, I had no idea. I know. That's part of the problem. You've spent 6 months analyzing the surgical department without ever talking to the person who runs it. I talked to other surgeons. Did you? Or did you pull data from spreadsheets and make assumptions? He ran a hand through his hair. Jessica never said you were a chief of surgery. Jessica doesn't know. How does she not know? Because she never asked. Neither did my parents. You all assumed I was still a trainee, still figuring things out. I stopped correcting you. But your job, it's a huge accomplishment. Why wouldn't you tell people? Why would I? So my dad could compare my salary to yours? So my mom could ask when I'm getting married instead of focusing on my career? So Jessica could feel threatened. I shook my head. It was easier to let you all believe what you wanted to believe. Brad leaned against the wall. I've made a complete ass of myself. Yes. The wedding's in 6 months. Jessica's going too. He stopped. Does she have to know about this? About you proposing to gut my department? Or about me being your boss's boss? Either. Both. He looked genuinely panicked. She'll be humiliated. She spent Thanksgiving bragging about my authority while you sat there knowing you outrank me. I don't outrank you. We have different roles. Rachel, you control my entire budget. You determine what programs get funded. You could make my job impossible if you wanted to. I'm not interested in making your job impossible, Brad. I'm interested in protecting my patients and my surgeons. He was quiet for a moment. The equipment cuts. The supply changes. You're saying they'd actually harm patient care. Some would. Some are just inefficient. Some show you don't understand the surgical environment. I softened my tone slightly. Look, I'm not opposed to efficiency. I'm not opposed to cost savings. But you can't make these decisions in a vacuum. You need to work with the people who actually do the work. I thought I was. You talked to a few surgeons who agreed with you. You didn't talk to the department head. You didn't shadow in the OR. You didn't observe our workflow. I crossed my arms. You treated surgery like a widget factory. Optimize the process, reduce the costs, improve the margins. But we're not making widgets. We're saving lives. Brad slumped. I've screwed this up completely. Not completely. Some of your ideas have merit. The scheduling improvements, for instance. We probably can reduce some overtime with better coordination. And I'm willing to look at your vendor proposals if you can provide actual outcome data. Really? I'm not unreasonable, Brad. I just need you to work with me, not around me. He nodded slowly. Does this change? I mean, are you going to ruin your career? Get you fired? Tell Jessica? I shook my head. I'm going to do my job, which is protecting my department and my patients. What happens with you and Jessica is your business. But you have that power. Having power and using it are different things. The door opened. Patricia stuck her head in. You two ready to continue? Yes, I said. We're ready. The afternoon session was more productive. Brad proposed, I countered, we negotiated. He agreed to maintain all 3 surgical robots. I agreed to explore his vendor proposals with the caveat that any changes would require a 6-month trial period with strict outcome monitoring. He withdrew the most aggressive staffing cuts. I agreed to implement better scheduling to reduce overtime costs. By 5 p.m., we'd reached a compromise. A 7% budget reduction instead of 18%, achieved mostly through efficiency improvements rather than cuts to equipment or staff. I can work with this, I told Patricia. Brad looked exhausted and relieved. Thank you, Dr. Chin. As we packed up, the CEO, Dr. Morrison, approached me. Nice work in there, Rachel. Brad's talented but overzealous. He needed someone to push back. Just protecting my territory, James. You do it well. That's why we promoted you. He glanced at Brad, who was gathering his materials. Is it true he's marrying your sister? Apparently. James chuckled. That's going to make for interesting family dinners. You have no idea. I left the hospital at 6, exhausted from the long day. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Jessica and 2 from my mother. I ignored them and drove home. But Jessica was persistent. At 8 p.m. she called again and I answered. Rachel, thank God. I've been trying to reach you all day. I was working. What's up? Brad called me after work. He sounded really upset. She paused. He said you're the chief of surgery at Memorial. I am. Silence. Then, since when? 2 years. 2 years? Rachel, why didn't you tell us? You never asked. Don't give me that. This is a huge deal. You run the whole surgical department. Yes. How many people report to you? Directly? 12 division chiefs. Indirectly? About 300 surgeons, residents, fellows, and support staff. I heard her inhale sharply. 300 people. And you just never mentioned this. Jessica, at Thanksgiving you introduced me as someone who's still in training. When I corrected you, you said I was just doing surgeries. Why would I waste my breath explaining my actual job? Because we're family. Are we? Or am I just the disappointing younger sister who makes you look good by comparison? That's not fair. Isn't it? Dad spent an hour at Thanksgiving bragging about Brad's $40 million budget. My departmental budget is $127 million, and nobody asked me a single question about my work. We didn't know. You didn't want to know. You'd already decided I was less successful than you. Facts would have complicated that story. Jessica was quiet for a long moment. Brad says you control his budget. I control the surgical department budget. His operational budget is separate. But yes, I have input on resource allocation. He's terrified you're going to sabotage his career because of me. Why would I do that? Because we've all been. She struggled for words. Rachel, I'm sorry. We've been terrible to you. Yes. Brad told me what he proposed. The cuts, the equipment reductions. He said you shut him down in front of everyone. I protected my department. That's my job. He feels humiliated. He should have done his homework. If he'd bothered to learn who ran the department he was proposing to cut, he wouldn't have embarrassed himself. You could have told him at Thanksgiving. Why? So he could treat me differently? So you could brag about having a chief of surgery in the family instead of a failure. I laughed bitterly. Jessica, I'm not a trophy. I'm not here to make you look good. I never said you were. You introduced me as between jobs to Brad's colleagues. You suggested I get a real job in administration. You've spent my entire adult life treating my career like it's less important than yours. I didn't know. You didn't ask. Silence. Then quietly, you're right. I didn't ask. None of yous did. She paused. Mom and Dad don't know yet. About your position. I assumed Brad would tell you and you'd tell them. He told me not to. He's afraid. God, Rachel, he's afraid if Dad finds out he'll be humiliated too. That the whole family will realize they've been dismissing you while you're actually more successful than any of us. I'm not more successful. I just have a different job. Don't do that. Don't minimize it. Brad looked you up. Johns Hopkins undergrad, Harvard Medical School, surgical residency at Mass General, fellowship here. You've won awards. You've published in every major surgical journal. Her voice cracked. You're kind of famous in medical circles apparently. I'm good at my job. You're exceptional at your job. And we treated you like you were failing at life. I sat down on my couch, suddenly very tired. Jessica, what do you want from me? I don't know. Forgiveness. Understanding. For you not to ruin Brad's career because our family's been horrible to you. I'm not going to ruin Brad's career. I'm going to make him better at his job by forcing him to actually understand surgical operations before making proposals. That's good for him and good for my department. He's scared of you now. Good. Maybe he'll do his research next time. Rachel. Jessica, I've had a very long day. I performed an emergency surgery at 6 a.m., spent 5 hours in a budget meeting fighting to protect my department's resources, and I'm exhausted. I don't have the energy for this conversation. When can we talk? Really talk? I don't know. Maybe never. Maybe I'm done trying to make you see me. Please don't say that. Why not? It's true. I spent years trying to get you, Mom and Dad, to understand what I do, to care about my work, to see me as something other than the disappointing one. And it never worked. So I stopped trying. And honestly, my life got better. Because you have other people who appreciate you. Yes. Colleagues who value my expertise. Patients who trust me with their lives. Residents who look up to me. I don't need my family's approval anymore. But you want it. The words hit harder than I expected. Maybe I did. Once. And now. Now I'm too tired to care. I hung up before she could respond. The next day at work was busy. 3 scheduled surgeries and a consult on a complex trauma case. I didn't think about Brad or Jessica or the budget meeting until Patricia stopped by my office at 4 p.m. Brad submitted his revised proposal, she said, handing me a folder. It incorporates all your feedback. Very thorough. I flipped through it. He'd done his homework this time. Outcome data from the proposed vendors, detailed scheduling analyses, realistic timelines for implementation. This is good work, I admitted. He's terrified of you, you know. So I've heard. Patricia sat across from my desk. He came to my office this morning and asked if he should resign. What did you tell him? That he's good at his job when he remembers that hospitals aren't factories. That he made mistakes but he's learning from them. And that you're not interested in destroying him, you're interested in patient care. All true. He also asked if there's any way to avoid humiliating his fiancé's family. I looked up. What? Apparently your family doesn't know you're chief of surgery. They think you're a junior surgeon still finding your way. Brad's worried about what happens when they find out. That's not my problem. No, but it is his problem. He's marrying into a family that completely misunderstood one of its members. That's awkward. I set down the folder. Patricia, my family decided who I was a decade ago. I got tired of fighting that narrative. If they find out the truth now and feel embarrassed, that's not my fault. Of course not. But Brad's in an impossible position. Keep your secret and feel like he's lying to his fiancé's family, or tell the truth and expose how wrong they've been about you. Again, not my problem. Patricia studied me. You're angrier than you're letting on. I'm not angry. I'm just done. Done with what? Trying to make them see me. Trying to prove I'm worthy of their attention. Trying to fit into their hierarchy of success. I lean back in my chair. I have a department to run, lives to save, residents to train. I don't have time for family drama. Rachel, you're one of the most brilliant surgeons I've ever worked with. But you're also human. It's okay to be hurt that your family didn't see you. Noted. She smiled sadly. That's not a healthy response. Maybe not. But it's the one I have energy for right now. After she left, I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting. To Thanksgiving dinner, to my parents' dismissive comments, to Jessica's introduction of me as the failure of the family, to the look on Brad's face when he realized who I was. My phone rang. My mother. I almost didn't answer. But some habits die hard. Hi, Mom. Rachel, Jessica told me the most ridiculous thing. She says you're in charge of the entire surgical department at Memorial Hospital. Not ridiculous. True. But you never said anything. You never asked. Don't be difficult. When did this happen? I was appointed chief 2 years ago. 2 years. Rachel, why on earth wouldn't you tell us? Because at Christmas that year I mentioned I'd been promoted, and Dad interrupted to talk about Jessica's raise. I stopped trying after that. That's not. We would have listened if you'd been clear about how important it was. Mom, I was named the youngest chief of surgery in a major teaching hospital's history. How much clearer could I be? Silence. Your father is very upset. Why? Because he spent Thanksgiving bragging about Brad's management position while his daughter runs a larger department. That's not fair. Isn't it? Brad manages operations. I manage 300 people and a $127 million budget. But Brad's the one with real authority, apparently. We didn't know. You could have known. You could have asked. But you decided I was the disappointment and you never questioned that assumption. We never said you were a disappointment. You said I needed stability. That I should learn from Brad about strategic thinking. That I was still in training while Jessica's fiancé was actually running things. My voice was calm, clinical, like I was presenting a case study. You said all of that 3 weeks ago, Mom. Thanksgiving. While I sat at your table knowing that I outrank Brad in every meaningful way. Rachel. I'm not angry, Mom. I'm just tired of being invisible. You're not invisible. Then tell me one thing about my work. One specific thing. Not you're a surgeon, or you work at a hospital. One actual detail about what I do. Silence. That's what I thought. This isn't fair. You're putting me on the spot. I'm asking you to know your daughter. That shouldn't require putting you on the spot. I heard my father's voice in the background. Mom muffled the phone, then came back. Your father wants to talk to you. I don't want to talk to Dad right now. Rachel, please. I hung up. For a moment I sat there staring at my phone. Then I turned it off completely and went back to work. The next week was a blur of surgeries and meetings. Brad avoided me, communicating only through emails that were meticulously professional. Jessica texted twice asking to meet for coffee. I didn't respond. On December 11th, Patricia called me into her office. We need to talk about the gala. Memorial Hospital's annual fundraising gala was a major event. 500 guests, major donors, community leaders, board members. As chief of surgery, I was expected to attend and schmooze with potential donors. What about it? I asked. It's this Saturday. You're presenting the Surgical Excellence Award to Dr. Marcus Webb. I know. Your family RSVP'd. 4 tickets, your parents, Jessica and Brad. I closed my eyes. Of course they did. I'm assuming they don't know you're presenting? They don't know I attend these events, period. Rachel, this is going to be very public. You'll be on stage. Your bio will be in the program. There's no hiding who you are. I'm not trying to hide. I just haven't advertised. Well, you're about to advertise in front of 500 people, including your entire family. She paused. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared to present an award to a deserving colleague. What my family does with that information is their problem. Saturday arrived cold and clear. The gala was held in the hospital's grand ballroom, a space usually reserved for board meetings but transformed for the occasion with round tables, elegant centerpieces, and a stage with professional lighting. I arrived at 6, an hour before the event started, to review my remarks and check the technical setup. My dress was simple but elegant. Black, professional, with the kind of understated jewelry that signaled competence rather than flash. Patricia found me backstage. You look terrified. I hate public speaking. You speak at medical conferences all the time. That's different. Medical conferences are about science. This is about performing. You'll be fine. Just introduce Marcus, read his achievements, hand over the award. 5 minutes, tops. My family's out there. I know. They still don't know I'm presenting. Jessica texted yesterday asking if I'd be at the gala. I didn't respond. Patricia squeezed my shoulder. For what it's worth, I think they're about to be very proud. And very embarrassed. The ballroom filled up. I watched from backstage as guests found their tables, as waiters circulated with champagne, as the hospital CEO worked the room like the fundraising professional he was. Table 14. That's where my family sat. I could see them through the gap in the curtain. Mom in a cocktail dress, Dad in his best suit, Jessica radiant in silver, Brad looking uncomfortable in black tie. They had no idea I was 30 feet away, heart pounding, preparing to walk onto that stage. The program began. Dinner was served. The CEO gave his opening remarks, thanking donors and highlighting the hospital's achievements. Then Patricia took the stage. Every year, Memorial Hospital recognizes excellence in surgical care. This year's recipient has performed over 800 successful cardiac surgeries, published groundbreaking research in minimally invasive techniques, and trained 2 generations of residents. Please join me in welcoming our Chief of Surgery, Dr. Rachel Chin, to present this year's Surgical Excellence Award. I walked onto the stage. The spotlight was bright. The applause was loud. And at table 14 I watched my family's faces transform. Dad's mouth fell open. Mom's hand went to her chest. Jessica looked like she'd been struck. Brad just closed his eyes, probably praying for the ground to swallow him. I stepped to the podium, adjusted the microphone and began. Good evening. I'm Dr. Rachel Chin, Chief of Surgery here at Memorial Hospital. It's my privilege tonight to recognize a colleague who embodies everything we strive for in surgical excellence: technical skill, compassionate care, and dedication to teaching the next generation. My voice was steady, professional. I didn't look at table 14. Dr. Marcus Webb joined Memorial's cardiothoracic division 15 years ago. In that time, he's performed over 1,200 successful surgeries, developed 3 innovative surgical techniques that are now used worldwide, and mentored 47 residents and fellows. I went through Marcus's achievements, his research, his patient outcomes. I told the story of a particularly complex case he'd saved last year. A 72-year-old woman with multiple comorbidities who, by all conventional wisdom, shouldn't have survived. But Dr. Webb doesn't accept conventional wisdom. He saw a patient who deserved a chance and he gave her that chance. She walked her granddaughter down the aisle 3 months ago. The audience was rapt. This was what I loved about medicine. The stories, the lives saved, the moments of grace in the midst of crisis. Dr. Webb represents the best of what we do here. He makes us all better surgeons, better physicians, better people. It's my honor to present him with this year's Surgical Excellence Award. Marcus joined me on stage. We shook hands. I handed him the Crystal Award. He gave a short speech thanking his team, his family, the hospital. And then I walked off stage, my part done. Backstage, I leaned against the wall, adrenaline flooding my system. Patricia appeared. That was perfect. I think I'm going to throw up. You're not going to throw up. You're going to go out there, thank donors, and represent this department with the same excellence you just showed on stage. Pie family. We'll have to deal with reality. Come on. She steered me back into the ballroom. Immediately, donors surrounded me, wanting to discuss surgical programs, ask about research, share stories of family members I'd treated. I fell into the familiar rhythm of fundraising. Smile, listen, thank them for their support, explain the impact of their donations. This was part of the job and I was good at it. But I was acutely aware of table 14. Of my family sitting there, frozen as they watched me work the room. Finally, inevitably, I ended up at their table. Mom, Dad, Jessica, Brad. My mother stood up and hugged me fiercely. Rachel, we had no idea. I know. Dad was shaking his head. Chief of Surgery. You're the Chief of Surgery. For 2 years now. Jessica looked shell-shocked. You were on stage. Everyone knows you. That donor you were just talking to, he called you one of the best surgeons in the country. Dr. Morrison is generous with his praise. Brad stood awkwardly. Dr. Chin, Brad, you're off the clock. Rachel, is fine. I should have. At the budget meeting I should have. You should have done your research. You did eventually. We're fine. An older woman approached our table. Dr. Chin, I wanted to thank you again for taking care of my husband. The triple bypass you performed last month, he's doing wonderfully. I'm so glad, Mrs. Patterson. He was a model patient. You saved his life. I can never thank you enough. She squeezed my hand and moved on. My mother was crying. Rachel, all these people, they all know you. I work here, Mom. These are donors, colleagues, patients' families. But you're important. Really important. I'm a surgeon. I do my job. Dad finally found his voice. The program says you have 73 publications. Is that true? 75 now. 2 more came out this month. And you're only 34. Yes. Jessica's voice was small. Why didn't you tell us? I looked at my sister, really looked at her. She wasn't angry or defensive. She looked lost. Would you have heard me if I'd tried? I don't know, she said honestly. Probably not. Then there's your answer. The gala wound down. My family stayed at their table watching me navigate the room, clearly seeing me in an entirely new light. As the event ended, Jessica approached me. Can we talk? Somewhere private. I led her to a quiet hallway outside the ballroom. For a moment we just stood there. I've been a terrible sister, she said finally. Yes. I spent so long being the successful one, the accomplished one. I needed you to be less than me. And when you tried to tell me otherwise, I didn't want to hear it. I noticed. Brad told me everything. About the budget meeting, about your department, about how I've been treating you. Tears streamed down her face. Rachel, I'm so sorry. For what, specifically? For dismissing you. For introducing you as a failure. For never asking about your work. For making everything a competition where you had to lose so I could win. I leaned against the wall. Jessica, I'm not angry. I'm just tired. Of me. Of trying to make you see me. Of defending my choices to people who should already respect them. Of being invisible in my own family. You're not invisible anymore. No. But I shouldn't have had to be on stage in front of 500 people for you to see me. You should have seen me at Thanksgiving when I tried to tell you I'm not a resident. You should have seen me at Christmas 2 years ago when I mentioned my promotion. You should have seen me every time you called me a disappointment and I didn't argue back. She nodded, crying harder now. What can I do? How do I fix this? I don't know if you can. Trust takes time to build and you spent years breaking mine. I want to try. Please, Rachel. Let me try. I looked at my sister, really looked at her for the first time in years. Saw her not as the golden child or the competition, but as a person struggling with her own insecurities. Okay, I said quietly. We can try. But Jessica, this has to be real. No performances. No competitions. No dismissals. I promise. And you have to actually want to know me. Not because I'm chief of surgery or because I'm impressive to your friends. Because I'm your sister. I do want to know you. The real you. We hugged then, really hugged, and something in my chest loosened slightly. Mom and Dad found us in the hallway. Rachel, Dad said, and his voice was thick with emotion. I owe you an apology. A big one. Several, actually. He laughed, but it was shaky. I've spent years telling you to be more like Jessica. To get a stable job. To think strategically. And you were already doing all of that. You were doing it better than any of us. I tried to tell you. We didn't listen. We were so invested in our narrative, successful older daughter, struggling younger daughter, that we couldn't see the truth even when you showed it to us. Mom stepped forward. Can you forgive us? Can you give us a chance to actually be your parents instead of your critics? I thought about it. About the years of dismissal. About Thanksgiving dinner. About every time I'd tried to share my achievements and been talked over. But I also thought about the exhaustion of carrying resentment. About how much energy it took to stay angry. I can try, I said. But things have to change. You have to actually ask about my life. Listen when I answer. Stop comparing me to Jessica and Jessica to me. We're different people with different paths. We can do that, Mom said. We want to do that. Brad had been hovering at the edge of the conversation. Now he stepped forward. Dr. Chin, Rachel, I want to apologize too. For proposing those budget cuts without understanding your department. For assuming I knew better than you. For being arrogant and underprepared. Apology accepted. But Brad, you're not a bad administrator. You're just young in this role. Learn from it. Next time, talk to the people who actually do the work before proposing changes. I will. I promise. Good. Because despite this rocky start, I think you could be really effective. You have good instincts. You just need to balance spreadsheets with reality. He looked relieved. Thank you. And for what it's worth, I understand now why you didn't tell us about your position. We made it impossible for you to share good news. Yes, I said simply. You did. We stood in that hallway, my family and me, in the awkward space between old narratives and new realities. Finally, Dad said, "Can we take you to dinner? Celebrate properly." "Not tonight. I'm exhausted." "Tomorrow then? Or whenever you're free." "I'll check my schedule. I have 3 surgeries this week and a research deadline." Mom smiled, and it was genuine. "Of course you do. You're chief of surgery. Among other things." We said goodbye in the parking lot. As I drove home, I felt lighter than I had in years. They saw me now. Finally, they saw me. The question was whether they could sustain that vision, or whether we'd slip back into old patterns. Time would tell. But for tonight, it was enough to be seen. 3 months later, I sat in a coffee shop with Jessica, reviewing wedding plans. She'd asked my opinion on flowers, on seating arrangements, on whether to invite certain relatives. "I want you to be my maid of honor," she said suddenly. I looked up from the seating chart. "Really? I know I haven't been the sister you deserved. But I want to start over. If you'll let me." "I'd be honored." She smiled, and it reached her eyes. "Thank you. And Rachel, I'm proud of you. Not because you're chief of surgery, but because you're you. Because you kept building your career even when we didn't see it. Because you're brilliant and compassionate, and you save lives every day." "Thank you. I mean it. I've been reading your research. I don't understand most of it, but I'm trying to. Because I want to know what you do. Really know it." "That means a lot." We talked for 2 more hours. About work, about life, about our childhood, and the ways we'd both been shaped by our parents' expectations. It wasn't perfect. We still had years of patterns to unlearn. But it was real. And that was enough. That evening, I operated on a 67-year-old man with aortic stenosis. Complex case, high risk, for hours in the OR. He survived. Stable vitals, good outcomes, excellent prognosis. As I scrubbed out, I thought about all the parts of my life. The surgeries, the research, the leadership, the family slowly learning to see me. None of it was simple. None of it was easy. But all of it was mine. And that was enough.